Welcome to the SmartTechCheck podcast, hosted by Mark Vina, your home for candid, insightful, and provocative conversations about the smart home automation, security, smartphones, PC and console gaming, and much more.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mark Vina, host of the SmartTechCheck podcast. Today's Thursday, August 15th, 2024. Joining me for today's podcast are Rob Pegoraro, who writes about tech developments at PC Mag, Fast Company, and other wonderful publications. John Quain, who writes for the New York Times, Smart Cities and Comms Guide, and a frequent contributor to my podcast, Dwight Silverman, the veteran technology journalist for the Houston Chronicle. Gentlemen, how are each of you today?
Very good.
Well.
Great.
Dwight, I'm not going to ask you that question that I asked offline. Where you're broadcasting your podcast, because we want to keep this PG rated. But I'll let the audience kind of imagine things of where they are. We're going to talk about a few specific topics. We're all going to be Rob. You're going to be at IFA. I'm going to be at
yes,
IFA.
Indeed. Seattle,
John,
just over 2
Dwight,
weeks.
are you going to IFA by chance? Perchance?
Fortunately, no.
It's
I
actually
get to stay home.
Yeah, it's a pretty good. I think it's a pretty good trade show. I think, in fact, in many ways, you see a view of the market, especially from a smart home standpoint, that you don't necessarily see at CES. So I'm excited to go. And hopefully we'll see some cool stuff. But I'm glad
this will be the first IFA I've gone to since we replaced all the appliances in the kitchen. So for once, I will not go to the show with just appliance shame lurking over me throughout it.
Yeah, it's a big white goods show, definitely.
Yes. Oh, yeah. And by the way, with a lot of European brands like Miele and others that don't really have a very significant presence in the United States. And but no, it's interesting. And I got to bring this up, John, because remember that hotel we stayed at?
Yes.
Hotel. Oh, that was horrendous. They put up
the ceiling was like here.
Oh,
I had
my
the
God.
world's smallest room.
Hotel, but no, there was some really great TikTok moments that came out of the room, especially the room that John stayed in.
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty fun. But anyway, let's jump into the topics here. We've got some spirited things to talk about. Let me bring this up. Dwight, you had kind of an interesting experience with HEB, which is, I used to live in Houston, is a major supermarket chain in the Houston area, and Apple Pay. So let's talk a little bit about that.
So this is a really interesting case. I realize that if we have a national audience, and some people may not have heard of HEB. HEB is a grocery chain that's mostly in Texas, as well as they have quite a few stores in Mexico as well. They are brilliant marketers. They have leveraged kind of the Texas mindset, the whole concept of Texas as an independent state as marketing. And people are fiercely loyal to them. The one knock that they get constantly and that they've had for more than a decade is that they do not accept Apple Pay. They don't accept any tap to pay. They have several store brands in the Texas area, including Central Market and HEB. And they just recently have started trialing tap to pay in one store in Dallas. And then this week I was told that they've opened it up to all of these particular types of stores known as Central Market, which is kind of a foodie grocery store.
Upscale.
And so when I heard that it was open it was available in one store in Dallas on a street called Lover's Lane, which is north of downtown, I decided that I was going to drive up there and actually do it just to say I had done it and see what the experience is like, because HEB is really good at improving the experience of anything that you do in a grocery store. And so I drove up there. I had a grocery list of about 4 items. I had a sandwich in their cafe and paid for that with my Apple Watch. I bought the 4 items and I hung out by the checkouts just to listen to people. And one of the interesting things about this cultural phenomenon down here is that anytime you talk to a checker at one of the HEB stores, they will tell you that the most asked question they have gotten for years is, when are you going to take Apple Pay? When are you going to take Google Pay? And to the point that some checkers have made mocking TikTok videos about this question. So it's kind of like releasing the pressure on HEB employees. I mean, they tell stories about people coming to HEB, buying a basket full of groceries, realizing they left their wallet at home because they use their phone all the time, and they have to run home to get a credit card because all they have is their phone, and it doesn't do them any good. So they've opened it up this week to all of the central market stores. There's one in Houston, and there are one scattered all over the country. What's interesting is that they have had, for at least 8 to 9 months, they have had tap to pay in their Mexico stores, and kind of was very quiet. Nobody mentioned it. I found this on a Reddit post. And so I would suspect that probably within a month it'll be everywhere. But it's just a really interesting phenomenon, particularly given what is happening with regulators, with Apple Pay. And, this just today, Apple announced that it's going to open up other wallets to use Apple Pay. So it won't just be their own digital wallet. So it's getting, it is just increasing. And I think HEB finally saw that they really just had to do it.
I'm still flummoxed because we're on the topic of Apple Pay. Is the one thing that I would love Apple Pay to comprehend is driver license, not Apple Pay. I'm sorry, Apple Wallet, the driver license capability, and they still haven't. I mean, there's a bunch of states they have, but California is not one of them, unfortunately. So
California is about to join. They are just about to join. And with Apple Pay, I think that's a matter of the states. I know Texas is kind of resisting it. And well, as much of a digital guy as I am, I'm not sure that I want to hand my phone to a cop at a traffic stop, which is what you could. I mean, obviously you would have a physical one too, and hopefully you have it. But more and more people don't carry a wallet.
Oh,
and I would just be really uncomfortable with that.
Right. Oh yeah, no, I agree with that.
I'm not sure I actually would use it, even though I'm about as digital a guy as you can get.
Yeah, no, it's a very, very good point, and I have to tell you, I can't remember the last time I whipped out my Wells Fargo debit card to physically use. I mean, maybe occasionally a restaurant where the restaurant has a kiosk at the thing. Yeah, but I could use my phone for that. At an ATM, maybe.
Yeah, there are still some big holdouts. There are still some big holdouts like Walmart. You can't use it at Walmart. Home Depot, can't do it at Home Depot. But I can walk up to almost any Coke machine and buy a Coke with my phone. I could walk up to any taco truck in Houston and pay for tacos with my phone. And it's just, we were in Canada and we were at this little tiny pottery shop across the street from the Airbnb where we were staying.
Hey folks, this is Mark Vina, CEO of SmartTech Research. SmartTech Research is proud to have Aura sponsoring my SmartTechCheck podcast. Aura security software is the all-in-one digital safety net for the whole family. It's literally like having a personal cyber guardian that protects all of the devices in your home on a 24/7 basis. What's more, its AI functionality stands out as it constantly learns and adapts to threats, keeping your family and you safe around the clock. It's a must-have solution for anyone serious about online security. Stay tuned for a special no-obligation promo offer for Aura that will give you cybersecurity peace of mind.
Hi, I'm Anna with SmartTech Research. Whether you're browsing the web, checking emails, monitoring your children's online behavior, spam calls and identity protection, and conducting online transactions, Aura has your back, ensuring a secure and seamless experience every time. Aura's comprehensive security solutions are compatible with Microsoft Windows, Apple Mac OS, Android, iOS, and iPad OS devices. For an exclusive 14-day no-obligation trial version of Aura, use the on-screen QR code or visit the website shown here. Aura is the smart, simple way to stay safe online.
And we asked the woman, we wanted to buy some of her pottery. It was beautiful. And I said, you don't take Apple Pay by any chance? And she goes, of course I do. And whipped out her Square reader and, that we did it. So it's kind of amazing that Walmart, Home Depot and other big holdouts are still holding out because people expect it now.
Well, and I imagine, and I want to get Rob's reaction and John's reaction. I imagine, Dwight, because you're the intrepid reporter that I know and love you about, is that what was HEB's holdup? Was it the financial issues? Not the issues, but Apple Pay, to be part of the club, it's not a cheap from a financial payment standpoint. It's more expensive than other some of the other services out there. Did you ever drill down to why HEB's been so resistant?
Well, actually, Apple Pay is free to the merchant. It doesn't cost the merchant
anything. I thought there were fees associated with that.
There are fees associated at the bank level.
Like swipe fee on it.
Yeah, okay. It's fees associated at the bank level, but not to the merchant. And but when I did an interview with the president of HEB in 2020 for a story about HEB's. HEB has a huge technology development center in Austin. I was doing a story on that, and I got a chance to talk to them there. And what he basically said was, it was a matter of control, and it's a matter of who owns the data. And at the time, back then, HEB, Amazon was just a couple of years off, a couple of years past buying Whole Foods. And there was a little bit of a paranoia from HEB, I think, that Apple would eventually try to get into retailing itself. And they were really worried about that. So data control and a little worried about competition was the main reason why they haven't done it. My suspicion is that them opening it up to other wallets may have been a factor to HEB deciding to do it, because HEB also just started offering its own credit card. And so you'll be able to put the credit card into any other wallet. HEB may even set up its own competitive wallet. Who knows? Right. So that may have had something to do with it.
Well, presumably you get rewards if you're using that HEB card.
Yeah. Yeah.
Rob, what's your reaction?
It's really amazing to see a company that still doesn't take NFC now. I remember 10 years ago, actually, almost 10 years ago. Remember when CVS had been taking NFC tap to pay? And then they stopped because they were backing the stupid initiative currency that involves scanning a QR code, because that's so super easy. And I wrote this post saying, if this bothers you, here's how to stick it to CVS. Find the credit cards that have the highest swipe fee, like bust out your Amex or your Platinum Visa or whatever, and stick it to them that way. And then, even though this piece I did for Yahoo Tech ran with a picture of me holding my Android phone, people are like, "Oh, you're in the tank for Apple," proving people are not just illiterate but unable to look at a picture. It's a big Google Wallet logo on the phone. You can see that,
right?
So, yeah, HEB. It's weird that they would have taken so long. I have heard it's great. A friend of mine lives in Dallas. He's a big fan of Central Market. Good for them. Next time I'm in Texas and need to do a grocery run, that'll be a point in their favor.
Call me up. I'll give you an escort.
Okay. At some point, I have to actually go to Houston and leave the airport. Someday I will make that happen.
Right.
John, your thoughts? Do they even have Apple Pay in Vermont?
We do. We have all that stuff. We have self-checkout and all that fancy high-tech stuff. What I'm surprised at is that they got through the pandemic without doing it. Like, how did that work? Except I'm figuring it's one of those particular states, and I can say this about that state because it's my home state, one of those states that didn't really kind of understand what was going on. But everywhere else, my goodness, there was a lot of resistance in New York City for many years in retailers among using systems like this, because if you have a cash business, certain things you can do that you can't do if you don't have a cash business. So they like cash. But the pandemic came along and really swept so much of that aside. So I'm surprised that an outlet that big could make it through the pandemic without supporting something like that.
No, it's a good point. It's a good point. But interesting topic, but it's nice to know that HEB is now finally in the Apple Pay fold. It's
getting there.
So, Rob, I was telling you this before we went to the start of the podcast, that you were at BlackHat not too long ago out here in good old Vegas. You completely ignored me, which bothers me, and we'll deal with that after the podcast is over. Well, any big revelation? That's got it. I've never been to BlackHat. I know from speaking to other people like you, it's an intriguing, the type of people that go to BlackHat. It's got to be an intriguing few days. So Give us what did you learn?
So BlackHat is this information security conference, InfoSec, that happens in Vegas every August because I guess rooms are cheaper when it's hotter than the surface of the sun. And so I've been going to that since 2018, and it's really fascinating. I love hearing InfoSec types say, here's the vulnerability we found, here's how we exploited it, here's how it was patched. And this year I was struck that was actually like good news. People talking about, there was a really good panel on the first day of it featuring Natalie Silvanovich, who runs Google's Project Zero initiative, which is something the company launched after Heartbleed, that vulnerability to say, let's just pay people to poke at software, ours, anyone else's, find vulnerabilities, get them fixed. And she said, when they launched this, they've always said, we'll give you 90 days to patch a vulnerability we disclose to you privately. At that point, we've got to warn other people. And at that time, it was like 14% of vulns were getting patched on that time frame. Now I believe it is 97%. There were other cases where people looked at, metrics like how many open source libraries have unpatched vulnerabilities. That number is way down. Just attention being paid, and also just to the usability part of it. There was a really good keynote on day 2 featuring Moxie Marlinspike, who developed the Signal encrypted messaging app. And he was talking about, this is something we had to learn. Security types going back to when PGP was a thing. They were like, people should appreciate the complexity. They should grok this the way we do. And we can't just meet the user where they're at. And no one really thinks that way anymore. And that's why Signal is so much easier to use than PGP was, which I used it. I would occasionally have readers send me encrypted mail, but it hasn't happened in a while. And no one seems to mind that I don't ever. I have a PGP public key listed somewhere. But yeah, if somebody uses that to email me after this chat, that'll be the first time in years. And that's good.
But Rob, I just want 1 second. I got to ask, because I don't want you to blow past it. Was CrowdStrike there?
Yes, they actually. So they have at DEF CON, which is the conference right after BlackHat, also for information security types. That one's all volunteer run. BlackHat, you can get a press pass. It's like a normal event. You shouldn't have to pay for dinner at BlackHat because every security company is treating people. DEF CON, it's volunteer run. There are no press passes. You can pay the same $450 cash as every other attendee. I opted out of it this year because I made a little detour to visit Boom Supersonic in Mojave, in California. Also a fun trip. But they have this set of awards called the Ponies, who got pwned with the worst. And CrowdStrike accepted the pony for, I guess, fail of the year.
Right.
So yes, they were there. They had a exhibit set up on the show floor. They seem to have a good number of people getting their T-shirts, perhaps ironically. So they were there. One thing I've seen really change over the last 5 years, the Washington presence. It used to be at BlackHat, people would talk about Spot the Fed. The guy is dressed, his haircut is a little too tightly cropped, must work for the NSA. Right. Feds are all over the place. And especially under the Biden administration, which has had this whole initiative, which I just wrote about for Fast Company. How can we build up the nation's cybersecurity defenses? And they've stuck amazingly a lot of this talking point, which is that we have to shift the burden of cybersecurity from those least able to bear it, the users, to those most able, the companies behind this stuff. And so they've been coming year after year with highly specific advice. The normal government speech at a tech conference isn't, you should be writing in memory safe languages. You should not charge extra for high quality audit logs, which is exactly the stuff two guys from CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Administration, like security so much it's in their name twice, gave it a BlackHat talk last year.
Well, and I want to throw this question directed to John. I mean, I'm sure it was a great conference. The thing that bothers me about what you just said, Rob, is they were kind of poking fun, or CrowdStrike. The event was poking fun a bit. It sounds like, and when you say a pony,
hackers are very sarcastic people.
Yeah. No, I know that. What bothers me is that, and we've discussed this a million times. I want to get John to react to it. There is CrowdStrike caused an enormous amount of financial damage for many companies, not to mention the loss of revenue and the inconvenience to people that were at airports. It was a horrible, horrible day, as you recall. And there doesn't seem to be repercussions. Now, there's a lot of litigation now being thrown around, and I'm sure CrowdStrike is they better have a very good team of lawyers. But the point I'm making, at that conference, are the folks, the constituents there saying, hey, listen, there has to be implications and actions that compel companies to do a better job, because the CrowdStrike stuff was embarrassing in terms of, it wasn't a hack in a traditional sense. It was an operational miscue software. Yes. So anyway, that's kind of my soapbox thing. But I mean, did you get any sense of that? And then I want John to comment.
Yeah, BlackHat isn't so much a blame people kind of show. All the talks you'll see are very much in a problem-solving way. Here is this problem that exists. Here is, and people go really into the weeds. I regret not catching a talk about using lasers to defeat the security on chips and read data off them. The slide deck for it was pretty epic.
Right.
So it's very much, let's work the problem. Let's document what's going on. I think there is a lot of talk about resilience. What can you do to make sure that your system is not brittle? And this is not even recent. You can see essays on this topic from Bruce Schneier, a very good security expert going back like 15 years. We have to have systems that fail gracefully. And so the CrowdStrike failure mode, where a PC or a server is rendered unbootable, that's not brittle. That's not resilient. And yeah, I don't know what the consequences of the company will be. I will say I was glad I was not traveling that day. I was at home, which meant as a technology journalist, it was actually good for me in the sense of new business.
Right. And there's the one time, so my comment is, it happened to be one of the few times I was flying on Southwest. So then having sort of an antediluvian software system actually could be in good stead. I got home, no problem. Although the flight was jammed because all the people from Delta had gone and run over and got on the Southwest flights. But you're talking about product liability, Mark's what's really asking, and that there isn't the kind of product liability that there is in other areas is still kind of shocking, except that there's so much money, as we are now learning. People want to support political candidates because they know they can make more money off of one than the other without any regulation. So there's no product liability. That's pretty much the main problem, unless I'm a big company and I sue Microsoft. So will Delta sue Microsoft? Probably. That back and forth that was going on. No, your fault. No, it's your fault. But if the ignition switch goes in a GM car, we know what's going to happen with that and who's going to get blamed for that. And then that's sort of where we're at with the software and grounding flights and causing all these serious problems. And as we use it more and more, life-threatening problems in some cases with healthcare, et cetera. So yeah, there should be more product liability, just like there is when my dishwasher goes or, my car breaks down because of a defect. Definitely a problem.
Well, what's interesting, Dwight, is that on the hardware side for years, there's been this notion, and Rob used the word redundancy, and that's been true at the cloud. It's certainly true at the local server level for years and years and years, that if there was a hardware failure, data was always backed up and you had pretty much seamless access to data. That doesn't seem to have happened in a real robust way at the security level side, So Dwight, do you have any thoughts on this? Because, you obviously, I hope you weren't one of the guys that was inconvenienced at the airport.
No. I was in place. One of the things I think that, it's almost like the corporate side can take a clue from the home user side. We've been telling home users for years to have more than one backup. We've been telling home users for years to not just have like Windows Defender or various Mac software, to have multiple tools to be able to get in there and protect yourself, as well as to get things fixed. And I think at least tech savvy home users do this. But when you're talking about companies that maybe need redundancies, don't want to put all their eggs in one security basket, that adds to cost. And cost, it's cost uber alles in this case, with money rules. And so it's difficult for them to do it. But I bet you anything, post CrowdStrike, you're going to have a lot more people who are going to moving their eggs around in different baskets.
Yes. Yeah. And that's part of the problem with CrowdStrike is that they're so popular
Yeah.
with Fortune 1000.
Well, they're easy. They were easy to do. You call them up, they come in, they have a out of the box thing. If you're using Windows, that's something where they can rely. They know how that works, and you're done. And however, I think one of the things that bugged me about CrowdStrike is that we've kind of had warnings about this for years with third-party vendors who get hacked or end up with ransomware, and it ends up impacting the customers that they're serving. They're small companies, and then bigger companies end up getting hurt because of this lack of security. And that should have been a clarion call for something like CrowdStrike.
Interesting stuff, but I have a feeling there'll be another CrowdStrike-like outage.
20 minutes from now.
I'm in Las Vegas. I wish I could
get through this podcast without it happening.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the Google announcement or their launch event early in the week on Tuesday. They announced a bunch of new Pixel smartphones. Just on that, which is always kind of interesting to me. I mean, Google's really never had a lot of success selling a lot of volume of Pixel phones. I think they have 1 or 2% of the overall market. I think part of they do that to kind of keep Samsung and others honest in terms of creating really, really good hardware. I've heard a lot. I've never used a Pixel phone, but I know folks who do.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
But
They're very good.
hardware, they're quite good. Yeah. And of course, they announced a number of enhancements to Gemini. We were talking before the podcast. They had a big, I thought, a pretty embarrassing snafu at the live event, showing how this new Gemini, this enhancement to Gemini, could help you create a list of a bill of materials, in effect, for baking a cake. If you were watching a YouTube video. But the thing that I want to just tee up here, and I had this conversation with someone yesterday, is that there's so much palatable excitement when we see these launch events. Whether it was the Apple event a couple of months ago when they kind of kicked off Apple Intelligence, where the folks on camera, I mean, these are Silicon Valley people. They're so enthusiastic. They're so enthusiastic about the most minute feature. Now it's, of course, all AI-based types of feature. It's going to change the world. And I really haven't seen anything quite yet that says to the mainstream world, these are capabilities that are going to force you to upgrade your phone, or let's say in the case of Microsoft. So it's kind of like a lot of manufactured excitement. Now, again, we've talked about this ad nauseum, but did you see anything at the launch event on Tuesday? I'll start. Don't laugh, John. Well, I'm going to start with Dwight. Was there anything launched on Tuesday that says, hey, I'm going to run out to the store and I'm going to upgrade my hardware? Dwight, go ahead.
Whenever there's I do this mostly with iPhone, but whenever there's a new piece of hardware, I write a piece that goes back several generations and says, if you own this phone, you should consider upgrading. If you own this phone, you're on the bubble. If you own this phone, probably no. And I think that's probably true with this. I've got a Google Pixel 6 Pro that I use as my regular Android device along with my iPhone. And I'm really interested in the 9, I think, at this point, mainly because of the camera. But also, I'm curious as to the different AI visions that Google versus Apple has. And after seeing this, I'm not sure that they're that different. I think that Silicon Valley is kind of pushing towards this kind of low-grade sci-fi version of what kind of world we're going to live in with our devices, where everything is voice and assumed about the way you live and what you do. I think the Humane AI Pen and the Rabbit R1 were kind of the perfect and very failed encapsulations of that vision of what Silicon Valley wants us to go to. And that you're seeing kind of the more logical step-by-step progression. I mean, everything that they talked about in terms of AI for the Pixel, and even the watch, which has some really interesting features as well, involves you not having to interact with the phone or with the watch. It kind of knows what it wants to do. It's not there yet, but that's kind of the thing, is where it knows. There's a really interesting Apple TV show called Sunny, and it's a Japanese American show. It's got Rashida Jones in it, and it's kind of one of these sci-fi shows where it's just slightly removed from our present day, with home bots that are emotionally intelligent and a small plastic device that looks very much like the Rabbit R1 that does kind of everything you wish a smartphone would do, but you just talk to it and it just happens. And that, I think, is kind of what they're driving towards. And I saw a lot of glimmers of that in this presentation.
Now, Rob, what's interesting is that, Google, God bless them. Maybe I shouldn't use that phrase. But the interesting thing about these new Pixel smartphones, and I'm sure they're going to have, equally or perhaps even better video and image capability than current generation their current generation phones. The thing that's interesting to me is that there was nothing unique about those new phones don't have exclusive features from a Google Gemini standpoint that if you just put a standard, current vintage Samsung smartphone. So I keep wondering, what is the purpose of Google being in the smartphone business other than to keep the other guys honest in terms of trying. It's their, when they come out with a phone, it's their vision of what a great smartphone should be. So what are your thoughts on that particular angle?
So I've been buying exclusively Google phones for the last, actually over 10 years now, when they were Nexus phones. And the single best feature is one that's been around for a while. We were talking about airlines. Hold for me. You call up the airline or whoever, the whole music starts playing. The phone says, would you like me to listen to this for you? Tap a button, put down the phone. Then when a human picks up, the phone buzzes, rings, and then you can actually talk to the person without having heard, if you're calling United, an hour of Rhapsody in Blue or whatever. That's good. And it's only on Pixel. And I don't know why anyone would buy another Android phone. Samsung makes good hardware. Their software layer is kind of bad, and you get software updates later. So that's a huge advantage. As it happens, I am in the market for a new phone. My old Pixel 5a seems to have bricked itself overnight last week. I'm alone with Pixel 8a, which is a nice little phone. So the next phone I'm going to buy will either be this model or one of the Pixel 9 series. And I'm kind of leaning towards maybe treating myself to the 9, not for the AI features so much. Better camera. It has emergency SOS via satellite, which... Right. Not planning on being in a position of needing that, but it's nice to know that it's there. It should have better battery life than the 8A, which I did find over a couple of days of hard use at BlackHat was not necessarily a phone that I would be confident not recharging over a long day at a busy tech event. So I think Google does have a good feature set here. The market share has crept up. It was 5% the last data I saw, which is better than 1%. So yeah, I will be interested to see. There's two kinds of AI that's on the 9 series. One is the on-device stuff, like snapshots, which is like what Microsoft was trying to do with Recall, but it's not capturing everything. It's just you capture screen grabs, it'll extract the useful data from them to remind you of what recipe you're going to look up or whatever. Right. That seems useful, and that's on device. It's private to you the same way it can summarize a call that you're on, and that's only done on the device. Then there's the Gemini Advanced stuff. You get a year of that for free. How many people will pay for it after that free year? I will bet there will be a small number.
Right. John?
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
I think the recipe stuff is great as long as you're happy eating glue for dinner. But aside from the fact that it doesn't work yet, which is probably the biggest thing about the AI issue, it does not work yet. It's fine for goofing around and doing a couple of images that you might need. But it does indicate, as Dwight was saying, sort of what the vision is, where people want to go with it. Could it get to be actually accurate and not make horrific mistakes every single answer? I mean, anybody watching the AI and their Google search will see every answer pretty much in that first graph. There's something wrong with that answer, which is kind of astounding, right? Given the amount of computational power that's being exerted on it. But yeah, I think there are features like the one that Rob just described. A hold is like a convenience that really makes your life a lot easier given the voice navigation systems we have to go through just to get an answer to a question. But a lot of the stuff is available too, like T-Mobile will be allowing phones going back at least 10 years, all to have satellite communication, direct to satellite communication. So it's already kind of there. I'm not sure that they're offering anything yet, but if you dropped your phone, maybe you need a new one, and that might do it. But yeah, the vision is there, absolutely. And you know, people in the Valley are going to say, hey, it's an iterative process. It's just that the iterative process is taking a long time, and I don't want to be the guinea pig, even though that's my job to be the guinea pig. I don't really like being the guinea pig for this stuff. And I'm a positive person. I'm sounding really negative today. I love technology. So I think it is. And I think it's a great phone too, by the way. The bottom line is, for an Android phone, it is a great phone. No question about it.
Yeah, you see what
there's one feature that I wanted to mention that's not in the phone but in the watch. And as somebody who's getting way too close to the age of 70, this was interesting to me. There's a feature that called pulse loss detection. And it will, if you turn it on, you have to turn it on. And if the phone senses you have no pulse,
right,
it will offer to call 911 for you. Now, of course, if you have no pulse, you probably don't notice that it's making this offer, but then it does. And this could either be really life-saving or horrible things could go wrong.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the thing that's actually like useful and life-saving. There are many, many stories out there about the Apple Watch and its ability to detect AFib or a pulmonary embolism and alert you, go to a doctor now, and it's saved lives. And I think this is another one of those things that may actually be like that, or it may, not.
Interesting stuff. Well, and I'll just conclude this conversation is that I always feel left out of the conversation here in terms of other brands of smartphones, because I've been, I bought into the Apple ecosystem years ago. And, we've talked about this before, is that if you have an iPhone, you can't enjoy the text messaging features on a Windows platform because Apple protects their ecosystem so strongly, which they have every right to do. But, I guess my assumption is that if I had a Google Android phone, there's probably good apps that will allow me to take advantage of some of that on a Mac platform. But I'm certainly not a Windows platform. You're kind of left out of the party if you're an iPhone user. So,
yeah, I have to admit, the one Rob mentioned too, Snap, the feature of taking the screen grab and then reading what's on the image, I think is actually really helpful, because all these images I get of invites to different things, or here's the invite for it, and I can't capture it. There might also be some copyright issues, though. That'll come up. A lot of people protect their sites so you can't copy things like that. And now this will kind of allow you to do that. So I'm not sure how that will go.
Never know.
Yeah.
Let us tackle our last topic, and this is I put this in the category of nostalgia. And is the desktop dead? It was kind of the topic that you kind of teed up, Dwight. And then, hey, I used to be a dedicated desktop guy. When I was at Compaq and Dell, that was the stuff that I focused on. I, introduced the XPS brand at Dell, which was a high performance gaming brand before they went out and bought Alienware. And I was a desktop guy. And then when I started doing the work that I'm doing right now, I switched to a MacBook Pro, an Intel based one. And quickly, I didn't want to maintain different devices, as I was doing a lot of traveling. And now it's hard for me to really contemplate or rationalize why I should go out and get a desktop, but there are reasons. I mean, there are some considerations. And Dwight, why don't we talk about that for a bit?
All right. So I think the desktop is not dead any more than radio died when TV happened. Or that newspapers died when the radio happened. Newspapers are dying because the internet happened, but that's another thing. But the desktop is not dead. It is no longer the dominant and hasn't been for a long time, but it's still useful. Steve Jobs famously referred to the desktop piece, the PC, the personal computer form factor, as the truck of technology. You know,
Yes.
when you need to move something heavy, you throw it in the truck. And I long ago, for a long time, I had both a desktop and a laptop. And I recently got rid of my desktop, and now I use my laptop in a docking situation. It's a MacBook Pro, and I connect it to a Dell monitor that also has a built-in Thunderbolt 4 hub dock. And so my laptop is a desktop, and that's how I use it most of the time. The benefit to it is, as any corporate road warrior for the last 20 years can tell you, is that you undock it and you take it with you. But now it's just so easy to do. It's not a corporate thing. It's something you can just do normally. I have a reader who is asking me, they're older, they want to switch at the age of 80 to a Mac from Windows. And, part of me says, don't do it. The other part says, get yourself a laptop like a MacBook Air, which is thin and light, and get yourself a decent monitor and connect them up. It's easy, and you'll have both things. And so I don't think it's dead. I think it's morphed, and I think it's become something of a niche issue. But every laptop can be a desktop.
Yes, that's true. Rob?
I'm still on Team Desktop. I have this HP laptop in front of me. Back at home, there's a Mac Mini, which has aged fantastically well. It's the one with the M1 chip. I've got a 27-inch 4K monitor next to it. I find it sort of helps to have that sort of home-based computer. And also, like, as a tech journalist, I have to have a Mac and a Windows machine anyways. And I like Mac OS better as a desktop, as in computer on a desktop OS, because on a laptop, you don't have a touchscreen. There's no convertible mode. All these things that are commonplace in the Windows universe. You get more storage that way. You can, you're not stuck with a particular keyboard. And I think because cloud storage is so ubiquitous, everything on this laptop is synchronized with Microsoft 365. So many of the apps I use are web-based. So occasionally I need to remember to move a file into my M365 documents folder so I can access it. But I don't feel like I'm paying much of a penalty in usability to have this more flexible approach. And so that's, I realize my use case is not everyone's. And so most people, they just have one computer. And in that case, it does make more sense for it to be a laptop.
Well, I'll let John wrap it up with just the kind of feeling on my side is that when I was a desktop user, at that time, now we're flashing back to my Windows days, where graphics was a big deal. And I actually, took great pride to be able to upgrade the graphics card, every year or so with much stronger graphics. And you would get better payback with better graphics and not necessarily the CPU. With Apple Silicon, with what Qualcomm is doing with their Snapdragon stuff, the graphics upgrade is all embedded in that SoC. So as a result, it's also got neural capability and other AI-related features, but that ability is really kind of now has been negated. And even in an x86 environment on laptops, and Dwight will remember this, is that you could go out and buy an external GPU chassis that you could plug into a Thunderbolt port and actually take advantage of better graphics performance with an upgraded card. In the Apple Silicon world, that's not possible anymore. So I still kind of struggle. The only reason why I continue to use, I would consider to use it is for video editing. And the Apple Silicon has been so really good with the tools that I use. I really haven't seen a need there. But I'll let you conclude with what your thoughts are.
Well, I want to be a desktop person still, and unfortunately, I'm in a situation where, or fortunately for me, I'm fortunate enough that I travel between several different places. So I'm, 1 week in the middle of the country, another week in Vermont, another week in New York. So I could be in St. Louis. The dream I wanted was that Netscape dream. And that was the fear that struck, the hearts of people at Microsoft, because it was all going to go online and we were never going to be tied down to a machine ever again. Here we are, 20 some odd years later, and they still can't deliver that. Cloud services still can't deliver that, or they want to charge you so much money to copy the terabytes of data I have with me that it just doesn't make it feasible. But I would want it to just go from place to place, to desktop, and use whatever I had and not worry about where files were or anything. And since that's still not a reality, I'm a laptop person. I need to have the data with me, and I need to make sure I've got it for work. And the only way to do that now, practically speaking, is my reliable Lenovo laptop. And Lenovo's been, knock on wood, solid as a rock. So that's what I use to get around. I wish I could do that. And I do some of the, plugging into a larger monitor. It's kind of a docking station, not really, because then I got to plug in the keyboard. But I would like to be. We never got to that point, and that's my disappointment. But the laptop, fortunately, is the only way for me to work.
Well, guys, let's do it. Let's wrap it up there. That was a great conversation. I appreciate you guys calling in. To our audience, thanks for taking the time and joining me for today's podcast. For our viewing and listening audience, thanks for making the Smart Tech Check podcast part of your daily commute. Please make sure that you hit the like and subscribe buttons at the end of today's podcast, or use these on-screen QR codes to connect with me. You can also follow me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Mark Vina Tech Guy. And until next time, have a great week. And guys, thanks again for calling in.
Thank you.